Welcome back, everyone, and happy Memorial Day. We're going to be reading some stories based on this first story. It's about the American Revolution, but we're going to be reading various stories about our men and women in uniform. So we hope that you stick around with us for our other stories about spring and summer and about new growth and taking bold action together. We hope these stories will inspire you to live boldly, take wise chances, and with our friends and family make a difference together. So our first book is Victory or Death, Stories of the American Revolution by Doreen Rappaport and Joan Verniero, and illustrated by Greg Call. So go ahead and lean in with the spirit of adventure, grab a friend, and let's enjoy the story together. The Recruit, Robert Shirley. Peace talks between the English and Americans began after the Battle of Yorktown, but fighting in the central part of what is now New York State continued between American patriots and loyalists and their Indian allies. From the beginning, patriots and loyalists pursued the 6 tribes of the Iroquois Confederacy to become their allies. The Iroquois Confederacy stayed out of the conflict until July 1777, when British promises of future trade and land security convinced the Mohawk, Cayuga, Seneca, and Onondaga to go over to the British side. The Oneida and Tuscarora joined forces with the Americans. After the Battle of Yorktown, Mohawk leader Joseph Brant formed a militia that included both Mohawk fighters and 31 loyalists. His militia began attacking settlements. In May 1782, Washington issued the call for recruits to squelch these attacks. Robert Shirley reached his long, muscular arms across the table to pick up a pile of dirty plates. He was used to cleaning up other people's messes. He preferred working at Sprout's Tavern in Middlesboro, Massachusetts, to most other jobs. At least here, in between serving and cleaning, he could listen to the men talk about what it had been like in the battle. But tonight's talk was not of past victories. Tonight the tavern buzzed with the news that George Washington was calling for new recruits to combat the roaming bands of loyalists attacking settlements in western New York. Robert had followed every military action since the war began 7 years ago. He had wanted to enlist right after Lexington and Concord. He was 15 then. Boys as young as 14 were going off to war, but he couldn't go. He was working off his time as an indentured servant to Jeremiah Thomas. He had watched regretfully as one by one all 10 of Thomas's sons left to serve their country. Robert took over their work, toiling long hours in the fields, plowing and planting and mending fences. He was as strong and sturdy as any of Thomas's men. Over the clatter of dishes, Robert heard the same comments again and again. Most men said they had already sacrificed enough for the Revolution. They had left their families and farms and businesses to fight. They had done their duty as patriots. It was time for them to take care of their families. Robert didn't have family responsibilities. He didn't own a farm or a business. No longer an indentured servant, he was free to do what he wanted. As he saw it, joining the army would mean the end of his dull life. It isn't too late to be a soldier, he thought, soaping the dishes. Late that night, he took scissors to his thick hair. He didn't have a looking glass to see how well he was cutting it, but he didn't let that stop him. Slowly and methodically, he cut his blonde waves until layers of them covered the floor. Then he pulled his hair back over his ears and tied it into a bob, as was the style for men. He ran his hand over his beardless face. Hopefully his new companions would not comment on it. But if they did, he was determined not to let this bother him. The only thing that was important now was realizing his long-cherished dream of becoming a soldier. He donned a new ruffled white shirt, a coarse brown cotton coat, and tanned breeches. The clothes fit nicely over his lean, muscular body. He pulled up his sturdy farm boots. They were ill-suited for his new outfit, but would serve him well on long marches. All in all, at 5 feet 8 inches, he knew he cut a handsome figure. Relatives said he resembled the Shirley side. He hardly remembered his father, who had abandoned the family shortly after his 7th child was conceived. He buttoned his coat and took one last look around him, then stepped out into the cold night. Every morning on early Monday morning, May 20th, 1782, Robert completed his 25-mile walk to Bellingham. He went straight to the town tavern and told Noah Taft, the mustering officer, that he had come to serve his country. He signed his name in the record book. Taft examined his bold signature and pronounced him a soldier in the Massachusetts 4th Regiment in the Continental Army. He paid Robert 60 pounds sterling, deducing a small fee for signing him up. Robert Shirley looked into the mirror of his small dressing room in Boston's Federal Street Theater. It was March 22nd, 1802, almost 20 years since he had served in the Massachusetts 4th Regiment. He still cut a handsome figure in his blue and white uniform, even though he was somewhat thicker around the waist than he had been. Dressing tonight was easier than it had been when he was an enlisted man. He didn't have to wait to dress until the rest of the regiment left the barracks. He didn't have to wrap his chest with that uncomfortable cloth as he had then, and he no longer worried about his beardless face. After military service, Robert had returned to Stallington in Massachusetts to work on his uncle's farm. He had put away his uniform, never thinking he would wear it again. His life now, at age 42, was conventional. Giving lectures about being a soldier had been a good idea. He hadn't been sure that anyone would come to hear him. Some people called the very idea of his speaking on a public stage shocking and scandalous, and refused to come. A newspaper reporter named Herman Mann had assured Robert that people would come to hear him. Robert didn't completely trust Herman Mann. He had spent long hours telling Mann about his war experiences. Mann had shaped the interviews into a book. When Robert read the memoir, he was angry and disappointed. It was filled with exaggerations and half-truths. He had told Mann in no uncertain terms to correct the errors in the next printing. But Mann had been right about people coming tonight. There were 300 people in the theater. He would make a nice profit this evening. He needed the money. Bringing up 4 children as a farmer had not proven profitable. Besides, why shouldn't he get the same recognition and respect that the other soldiers had gotten? He was still owed money for his military service. Last year, he petitioned the Massachusetts Senate for it. Paul Revere wrote a letter in his support. The Senate had not yet ruled on his petition. There was a gentle knock on the door. Time to go. He took a last look in the mirror and walked towards the wings. When the announcer said his name, he shouldered his musket, marched to the front of the stage, and stood at attention. Let the audience see how tall and erect a soldier can be. Let the audience see his immaculate pressed blue and white uniform and his shiny boots. Now to dazzle them. Let them see proof that Robert Shirliffe was as competent a soldier as any man could be. He bit off the end of the cartridge paper and stuffed powder into the musket's pan. He stood the musket on its fat end and dropped the remaining powder ball, and rolled up paper into the barrel. He pushed it all down with a ramrod. Then he raised his musket, held it level with the ground, and pretended to pull back the flints, as if ready to fire. He flinched in preparation of the musket fire he had heard so many times. Then he relaxed. This was only for show. He cleared his voice and smiled. "I know what you're thinking," he said in a deep, rich voice. He heard a few gasps. His voice was the one reason he had fooled everyone in the regiment. No one had realized then who he was. No one, not even Noah Taft, not his commander, not any of the soldiers in the Massachusetts 4th Regiment. No one had realized he was a woman whose real name was Deborah Sampson. "You are thinking," Deborah continued, "what made this woman slope from the soft sphere of her own sex to face the storms both of elements and the war?" She paused, as if waiting for an answer to the question. "For several years I looked upon the war without being able to join. I looked upon the scenes of havoc and devastation at Lexington and Concord and Bunker Hill without being able to extend a rescuing hand. Then, with an enthusiasm and frenzy that could brook not control, I burst the tyrant bonds which custom and the world denied women and became a warrior. I secretly grasped an opportunity which the world seemed to deny as a natural privilege. I prepared for battle." She stopped again. She knew her audience was expecting her to apologize for being unladylike by disguising herself as a man and becoming a soldier. Mr. Mann had insisted she apologize. She didn't feel she had done anything wrong. She continued, "I am indeed willing to acknowledge what I have done, perhaps in error because I swerved from the accustomed flowery path of female delicacy. I left my morning pillow of roses to a couch of brambles for the night, but I did it." Deborah Sampson inhaled deeply. She was proud to have been a soldier. She was glad to finally tell her story. This was the first of 6 lectures given by Deborah Sampson in Massachusetts, New York. We do not have the text of any other lecture, but we assume she probably gave the same talk again and again. Herman Mann wrote this first lecture. Sampson got Mann to make some corrections in the memoir, but he never corrected his misspelling of her name, Sampson. This incorrect spelling went down in the history books, and many people, even historians, still use it. Even today, historians have trouble separating fact from fiction about Sampson, Samson's life. Here's what we know is true about her. She served for 7 months with the Massachusetts 4th Regiment, but the extent of her participation in skirmishes against Joseph Brance's militia remains undocumented. She married a farmer named Benjamin Gannett on April 7, 1785. She finally got her pension and back pay in January 1803. She died on April 27, 1827. She's buried in Rock Ridge Cemetery near Sharon, Massachusetts. Even though we do not yet know all the details of Sampson's military life, her courage to defy the myth that women were unsuitable for combat and to risk her life on the battlefield has earned her an important place in history. In 1983, her home state, Massachusetts, recognized her courage. Governor Michael J. Dukakis declared Deborah Sampson the official heroine of the Commonwealth and set aside May 23rd in acknowledgement of the anniversary of her enlistment. In 1985, the U.S. Capitol Historical Society in Washington, D.C. issued a commemorative medal in her honor. Fortunately, Sampson was spelled correctly both times. Deborah Sampson's desire to fight for her country and her disguise as a man to do so were unconventional. Daring acts for a woman of her time. The fact that historians cannot yet verify many things about her life does not diminish her commitment to her country or her military service. All right, I hope you enjoyed Victory or Death and that you have an amazing Memorial Day. And thank you again for all those who serve.